In 1894, the smartest people in the world had a crisis on their hands, and the crisis was horses. Think about it. Every cart, every cab, every delivery in every major city ran on horses. New York City alone had around 100,000 horses working its streets, and those horses produced something on the order of 2.5 million pounds of manure every single day. So the experts did what experts do. They extrapolated. They drew the line forward. And the projection was apocalyptic. One widely repeated version had London streets buried under 9 feet of manure within 50 years. Cities were going to drown in it. Urban planners held conferences. Nobody could solve it. And then, the problem just vanished. Not because anyone solved the manure problem, because the entire question became irrelevant. Within about 20 years, the horses were gone, replaced by something almost nobody at the 1894 conference was planning for: the automobile. And I love the story because it's the whole pattern in miniature. The experts weren't stupid. Their math was right. They just asked the wrong question. They asked, how do we manage more horses? When the real question turned out to be, what replaces the horses entirely? And I think we are sitting in our own 1894 right now with AI. So today, I want to do something different from most conversations around artificial intelligence. I don't want to predict the future. I'm actually terrible at it. And so is everyone else. Instead, I want to look backward at the last 150 years of revolutions because the pattern is so consistent, it's almost spooky. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. When we list the big technological shifts, it sounds like a long, messy pile. Railroads, electricity, oil, the telephone, radio, television, the internet, smartphones, social media, now AI. But if you squint, almost all of them fall under just 4 buckets, and every bucket is really humanity answering one question. The first bucket is energy: fire, steam, electricity, oil, nuclear. The question is, how do we generate more power? The second is mobility: sailing ships, railroads, cars, aircraft. The question is, how do we move people and things faster? The third is information: writing, the printing press, the telegraph, radio, TV, the internet. The question is, how do we move ideas faster? And the fourth, the newest one, I'd call agency: industrial machinery, computers, software, and now AI. The question is, how much can one person actually do? But here's the part most people miss, and it's the key to everything that follows. Each of these revolutions did the same secret thing. It didn't just add a new power, it took something that used to be scarce and precious and made it nearly free. And the instant it did, something else quietly became the thing worth fighting over. Energy made power free, and suddenly the scarce thing wasn't horsepower, it was organization. Who could redesign the work to use all that cheap power? Mobility made distance cheap, and the scarce thing became coordination and trust across that distance. Information made knowledge free, and the scarce thing became attention. Who could be heard above the noise? Every single time, abundance in one place created a new scarcity somewhere else. And the winners were never the ones who hoarded the thing that got cheap. They were the ones who spotted the thing that just got rare. And hold on to that, because it's the lens for everything that comes next, including AI. When a real revolution hits, people massively underestimate how much of ordinary life gets rewritten. Not the headline stuff, the plumbing of daily life. Take railroads. We think of railroads as trains, faster travel. Fine. But here's what almost nobody remembers. Before the railroads, time itself was local. Every town set its own clock by the sun. Noon in your town was whenever the sun was highest over your town. There was no reason to coordinate because nothing moved fast enough to care. Then trains started crossing dozens of towns in a single day, and the schedules became chaos. By the 1880s, American railroads were juggling something like 68 different local time standards. It was unworkable. So on November 18th, 1883, the railroad simply invented time zones: Eastern, Central, Mountain, and Pacific, and they reset every clock in the country in a single day. They called it the Day of Two Noons. Sit with that. A transportation technology was so disruptive that it reached up and rewrote what time it is. You cannot brainstorm, "We'll need to redefine time," as a feature on your railroad lunch checklist. The second order effects are always bigger than the technology itself. Electricity is the same story, and it carries the single most important lesson in all of this. When factories got electricity, they did the obvious thing. They ripped out the big central steam engine and dropped in one big central electric motor. And productivity barely moved. For nearly 3 decades, economists could measure almost no gain. People started to wonder if electricity was overhyped. The problem wasn't the electricity. The problem was that they'd kept the old factory. Steam-era factories were built around one giant engine. Everything crammed close to the steam power source, connected by belts and shafts. Swapping an electric motor changed the energy and nothing else. The breakthrough came when a new generation realized you could give every machine its own small motor. Suddenly you didn't have to cluster around the engine. You could spread out, lay machines in the order of the actual work, light the place properly, let each worker start and stop their own station. They reinvented the factory floor, and that's where the assembly line comes from. The productivity explosion finally arrived in the 1920s, roughly 40 years after electricity became commercially available. 40 years. And the lag wasn't technological, it was imaginative. People had the power source for a generation before they had the new way of working to go with it. And remember that number, 40 years. We'll come back to what it really costs. Before I give you the data, I want you to meet someone. I'm going to make him up, but only barely. There were tens of thousands just like him. Picture a man in Nottingham, England, in 1811. He's a cropper, a finisher of fine wool cloth. It's skilled work. It took him years to learn, the way it took his father and his father's father. He's proud of it. It pays well enough to keep a family. He is, by every measure of this world, a man who did everything right. And within a few years, everything he knows is worth almost nothing. Not because someone invented better cloth, the cloth was often worse, but because a machine arrived that let an untrained teenager at low wages do the rough version of his life's craft, and the factory owners used it to cut his pay and cut him out. He smashes the machines. History remembers him with a name we now use as an insult: a Luddite, a fool afraid of progress. But he wasn't a fool. He was a man watching the floor fall out from under the one thing he was good at. And he was right about what was happening to him. That's the part we sand off the story. The Luddites weren't anti-technology. Their fight was about wages and dignity. And his fear wasn't irrational. It was accurate. Sound familiar? Keep him in your mind, because we're going to come back to him. But first, hold him next to a fear that turned out the opposite way. The ATM. The cash machine. When ATMs rolled out, the prediction was obvious and unanimous. This is the end of the bank teller. A machine that hands out cash, of course it replaces the human who hands out cash. So what happened? Between the 1980s and the 2010s, banks installed somewhere around 400,000 ATMs across the United States. And over that same stretch, the number of bank tellers actually went up from roughly 500,000 to over 600,000. But how is that possible? Because ATMs made it cheaper to run a branch. The number of tellers you needed per branch dropped, but because each branch got cheaper, banks opened far more branches to compete. And the teller's job changed. It became less about counting cash and more about relationships, sales, and service. The things the machine couldn't do. The technology didn't destroy the job, it redefined it. And here's the part that brings us full circle. The teller job is finally shrinking now. But watch why. It isn't the ATM. It's the smartphone. Tellers held on as long as the question was, how do we handle cash? What's moving them now is that the question itself changed to, do we even need cash? The machine that copied the teller's task couldn't kill the job. It took a shift in the underlying need to do that, which is the horse problem again, isn't it? The threat almost never comes from a tool that does your task faster. It comes from the question changing out from under you. And notice, the motor sitting where the steam engine used to be did nothing for 40 years. The ATM doing the teller's exact job did nothing to the teller's employment for decades. Swap one thing out for another, and almost nothing happens. The change comes only when somebody rethinks the problem. Substitution is inert, reinvention is everything. So if you can't win by predicting the future, and you can't win by resisting the technology, what does the pattern reward? The honest way to answer that is to put winners and losers side by side. Same moment, same technology, opposite choices, and watch what separates them. Start in the 1870s with a man named Gustav Swift. Back then, the entire meat business ran one way. You shipped live cattle east by rail to be slaughtered when they got there. Swift asked the question nobody was asking. Why ship the whole animal, most of which gets thrown away, when you could ship just the meat? The answer was a refrigerated railcar. And when he took it to the railroads, they refused him. They had fortunes sunk into cattle cars and stockyards. So Swift built the cars himself and routed his meat through Canada on a line that had no cattle business to protect. Within a year, he was shipping 3,000 carcasses a week to Boston. He didn't own anything the others didn't. He just asked the better question. And the incumbents were too busy guarding what they had to ask it. Now, the cleanest example in this whole talk, Kodak and Fujifilm. Both built on photographic film. Both saw the digital wave coming. And here's the twist. Kodak saw it first. A Kodak engineer built the world's first digital camera in 1975 in their own lab. And Kodak, staring at a device that threatened the film business that made them rich, could not bring itself to lead the world away from film. They filed for bankruptcy in 2012. Fujifilm faced the exact same collapse. Film demand fell by something like 90% and did the opposite. They pulled their own company apart looking for what they were really good at underneath the film and found more than 70 technologies they could send somewhere new. The chemistry that kept your photographs from fading? Turns out it fights aging in human skin. So Fujifilm started selling cosmetics. Their film expertise became medical imaging and pharmaceuticals. Today, film is under 1% of the revenue, and the company is thriving. Same industry, same disruption, same starting hand. One defended the past, and one mined the past for a future. And then the slow motion version of the same death. Encyclopedia Britannica. 244 years old. The gold standard of human knowledge, sold as beautiful leather-bound sets, door to door, the last print edition running $1,400. When the CD-ROM came, Britannica treated it as beneath the brand. Then Microsoft's Encarta put an encyclopedia on a disk for almost nothing, and Wikipedia finished the job. Britannica printed its final set in 2012, the same year Kodak went bankrupt. Two institutions that had defined their fields for generations, both undone in the same year, not by a shortage of technology, but by an unwillingness to let go of the thing they had made them great. So line them up. Swift and Fujifilm against Kodak and Britannica. The winners didn't have better technology. Kodak literally had the camera first. Britannica had the most trusted name and knowledge on Earth. The winners simply saw the value relocating, saw the old scarce thing becoming cheap and a new scarce thing appearing, and moved toward it, while the people across the street stood in the doorway defending the building. People are afraid that AI will take their jobs, and the loudest voices say so aren't the skeptics. They're the people building it. Last year, 2025, some of the most prominent AI leaders predicted that half of knowledge work, in some versions nearly all of it, could be automated within a few years. Now sit with how familiar that sounds. A machine arrives that can clearly do the task, and the smartest people in the room draw the straight line forward. Task automated, therefore job done, therefore the category disappears. That is the exact line the experts drew about the bank teller. It's the exact line they drew about the horses in 1894. From inside the moment, you genuinely cannot tell the founded fears from the unfounded ones. What history tells you is narrower and more useful. Confident, specific predictions are precisely what this pattern punishes. And here's the tell. And this is the part that still amazes me, because it didn't take 100 years this time. It took about one. The very people who made those predictions are already walking them back. The head of OpenAI, who said AI would probably replace most of the jobs people do today, went on to say he'd been pretty wrong, that he was, in his words, delighted to be wrong. And the head of Anthropic, who warned AI could erase half of all entry-level white-collar jobs, started describing it instead as a productivity multiplier, saying that if you automate 90% of a job, the last 10% simply expands to fill the space. Now read that last one back slowly. Automate most of the task, and what's left grows into the new job. That is not a new insight. That is the bank teller, almost word for word, delivered this time by the person who built the machine. Now I'll be fair, both of those companies are circling enormous public offerings, and we are going to destroy the workforce is a hard thing to sell to investors. Maybe that's part of it. But the deeper point holds either way. Even the people closest to this technology cannot hold a confident prediction steady for 12 months. So when anyone tells you they know exactly how this plays out, hold on to your wallet. So put AI through that lens from the start. If every revolution makes one thing free and crowns another thing precious, then the only question that matters is, what is AI making free and what is it about to make scarce? AI is making answers free. Cognition, the drafting, the summarizing, the first 90% of the analysis is becoming cheap and abundant, the way horsepower did, the way information did. And that tells you exactly where the value is moving. When answers are everywhere, the scarce thing is judgment. Knowing which answer is right, knowing which question was even worth asking, and being the human willing to put your name on the decision. The teller stopped being the person who counted the cash and became the person you trusted. That's not a downgrade. That's the value relocating, and following it is the whole game. And I want to come back to that 40-year lag, the one between electricity arriving and the world finally learning what to do with it. We say it casually. It took 40 years. But sit with what 40 years actually is. It's a working life. Somewhere in that gap was a person who learned the old way, was told to wait for the new way, and retired before it ever arrived. And let me bring back our man in Nottingham, because here's the honest part the optimists skip. The revolution was good for the world and brutal for him. Both are true. He wasn't wrong to be afraid. He was caught in the lag, and he never got to see the other side. I don't tell you that to depress you. I tell you that because it's the whole reason any of this matters. He couldn't see the pattern, and you can. That's the entire point of looking back across 150 years. Railroads, electricity, Kodak, the encyclopedia. Not to predict the future, but to recognize the shape of it while you're standing inside of it. The cropper had no way of knowing he was living through a pattern. We have no such excuse. We've watched this happen a dozen times. So here's the one thing I'd ask you to take away from this. Every revolution makes something free and crowns something else precious. AI is making answers free, which means the answer is no longer the valuable thing. The question is. So don't be the one guarding what just got cheap. Don't stand in the doorway like Kodak or like Britannica. Don't count the horses. Go find what just became scarce. Because the experts in 1894 weren't stupid. Their math was perfect. They just asked the wrong question. And the entire difference between Kodak and Fujifilm, between the cropper and the people who came out ahead is whether you can see the question changing before everyone else does. That's the pattern behind every revolution. Now you can't unsee it.